Nice easy one today. We're going to do an oil service on this Cayenne 958 diesel. This Cayenne is a 3 litre diesel, the same 3 litre TDI engine found in lots of VAG products. For example, Audis and Volkswagens, they all have that same 3 litre unit, which you'll see in a minute. I've owned this Cayenne for coming up to a year now, and for the past few weeks it's been asking me each morning on the dash that it needs an interim service, which is an oil service. These cars like to tell you when to service them, and they have a variable service interval depending on how you use the vehicle. So exactly when the interval is can change a bit, and that might also apply to the other vehicles with the same engine. I'll show you all the tools you're going to need to do this job, and of course all the parts you're going to need as well as we go along. It should be very similar for this car and all the other cars with that 3 litre diesel unit. One of the specific quirks to the Porsche Cayenne though is it doesn't actually have a dipstick for checking your oil level underneath the bonnet. What it has instead is an annoying digital readout of the oil level on the dash. As you can see, it's saying measurement inaccurate, engine not warm at the moment, although it is showing the same level as I saw earlier in the day when I was checking it and the engine was warm. I believe these engines take around 7 litres or a little bit more of oil, but overfilling them is a real big no-no and it really upsets them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the oil that comes out when I drain it and put exactly the same amount of oil back in, and then top it up to get it a bit closer to max, being careful not to overdo it. Other cars with this engine generally do have an oil dipstick, and they can be retrofitted to this as well, but that's by the by, we haven't got one right now. Before I go ahead and start trying to get underneath this car, it does have air suspension, so I'm going to raise the air suspension and lock it into service mode, which is really quite easy to do. To change the ride height, I actually need to start the car, which I'll just do now. So, to put it into service mode, which effectively locks the air suspension at its highest setting, quite convenient when you're trying to get under the car, hold it for 10 seconds. So as we saw, it said control off on the dash, and we've got the highest and lowest setting arrows flashing, both of them red, which is telling me it's locked into its service height. To get this to go off, you actually need to go and do a bit of a drive around, so this will stay in its service mode until you set off driving the car again. As you can see, that highest suspension setting does give you a lot of extra clearance. I've also driven it onto some wooden blocks just to give me that little bit more so I can get under there and not feel like I'm potholing. Let's get the bonnet open. You're going to want to pull the engine cover off, which is on 4 rubber bungs. You don't want to lose those rubber bungs into the engine valley, otherwise you'll be looking for them for a long time. You often get left behind, like this one just did. Just confirm they're all present and correct on the actual engine cover, and then take it away. Subscribers of this channel will be very familiar with this view because I had the dreaded problem with the engine valley coolant leak. The good news is I keep checking it every now and again with a boroscope, and I can confirm the coolant swimming pool has not come back, so that was a successful fix, even though it took 3 whole videos to complete it. Probably goes without saying, but here is where you will fill the oil later, and if you have a different car that's not a Cayenne with this engine, here is where you'll find your dipstick, and if I was going to retrofit one, this is where I'd be retrofitting. It'll be a yellow hoop, you know, classic style dipstick, but alas, we haven't got one today, unfortunately. Oil filter housing is over here. We'll come back to this later on. So now what we're going to do is get under the car, take off the 2 under trays and get access to that sump plug. So now I'm going to take off the 2 under trays, which are held on with 10mm screws. There's a row of them at the front, in the middle, and there's a couple down there as well for this second guard. You take the front one off first. One of mine's missing, but I don't think it makes a big difference. It just saves me a job. There are 2 more up in the wheel wells. there's loads more screws than I expected. I'll do a head count at the end so you can know that you've got them all. You can see evidence of that engine valley coolant leak. I should probably clean that off. Should be 14 of these. One of mine was missing, and one of them you can actually leave in, which I have, but there's 14 in total. So the drain plug is actually a 6mm Allen headed screw, so I've got that at the ready. I'm going to drain the oil into this large tub, which is definitely larger than 8 litres in capacity, so it shouldn't be overflowing under there. We'll see though. So whilst the engine's still warm, slightly, I'm going to take that out and set it draining, and then I'll show you the right oil and the right filter. So the sump plug is just here, 6mm as expected. Let's just get it moving. Yeah, right. So I'm going to slide this under here, twiddle it out. You do see people putting foil over this cross member, and it's not a bad idea. I'm just going to wipe mine after it's drained. Oh my god, it's a mess. I'm coated in it. Should have had gloves on as well. Right, I'll wipe my hands and I'll take the cap off in the engine bay just to make sure there's no vacuum, and it'll all pour out into this bucket. So this is the oil and filter that we're going to be using to complete this job. The filter, I've gone for a quality Marley version OX420D, which should be the same for all of the 3 litre diesels. Regarding the oil, I've gone for a 530 fully synthetic. This is a good quality oil. It's quite important the selection of oil you go for these engines. It needs to be a particularly low ash one, they say. So the spec you're looking for is Porsche C30. Definitely look for that when you select your oil. I think the original fill would have been Mobil, but this Miller stuff's good quality, so I'll run with that. While the old oil's still draining, I'm going to get the filter housing open and swap this new filter in. So this is the oil filter housing, and as you can see, it unscrews with a big 32mm socket, so you'll need one of those if you haven't got one. And what lives in there, quite simply, is the filter. It's got a locating tab which should locate itself as you're screwing it in. You'll see how we go. We've got the messy job of taking the original one out first. Right. You could hear when we actually released the suction from this, it actually let a lot of extra oil into that pan below. So if you don't do it at this stage, you're going to end up with a fair amount of old oil still in the system. So I'd definitely recommend taking the housing off whilst the sump plug's off. Get messy. In the filter box there is a new O-ring for the housing, which I'm going to swap on now. So to install the filter, you first put it on the lid, push the backside hole onto this locator here, and as you're screwing this in, this pin will find its hole and be held still whilst you're tightening this down. Just going to put a bit of the old oil on the rubber O-rings just to make sure they don't snag as it goes in. So it clearly says 35 Newton meters on the lid, which is handy. So that's what I'm going to torque it down to. Okay, so now it's time to put the sump plug back in. Again, 6mm Allen head. It torques up to 30 Newton meters. I am going to do something a little bit naughty in reusing the seal, but interestingly it turned out to be a Doughty washer, which is a washer with a rubber seal on the inside of it, and it seems really quite mint, so I'm going to reuse that. I'll get a new one for next time, but I haven't got one that's better than this to replace it with. I'm wondering if this is original or if this is aftermarket. Let me know in the comments. It's me from the future here. Now, I've done many oil changes on cars before and I've never had a problem, but I noticed a few days after changing the oil on this one, that sump plug was still leaking. I even pulled it back into the garage and tried to nip up that sump plug a little bit more, and that did not solve it. It turns out you should be using a special type of copper sump washer, which is actually one use. It's shaped like a bit of a donut and it'll crush down a lot more than a normal washer would, which helps because the sump plug sealing surface is not flat on this car. There's a couple of indentations, and that's why you need so much extra crush to actually seal it. Further to that, the actual thread that the sump plug screws into has cutouts near the bottom to aid the oil from draining fully from the sump. So where you'd normally expect with a sump plug that you are being helped by the thread keeping the oil back and also a normal washer keeping the oil back, neither of those things are straightforward on this car. I will of course add a link to the correct washer in the description. If that's the only thing you take away from this guide video, I can assure you it was worth watching just for that. To be honest, this is quite typical of my experience working on this car so far. It seems like the engineers have taken something simple and elegant and added complexity to the point where it's no longer reliable. But that's just what modern cars are like. I'm just going to use some old empty oil containers to pour this into so I can measure it. Obviously they've conveniently got the levels on the side, and this one's a 5 litre, so I'll get this one filled and then hopefully use another one and we can work out exactly how much oil's come out, so I know exactly how much to put back in for a starting point. So it looks like we've got 7.5 litres, maybe slightly over. So that's what I'm going to pour in, and then we'll check on the dash. Right, now it's all buttoned up, under trays are back on. Let's give it a start. Well, it's sounding good. A little clattery for a moment as it started, but oil pressure's there. Let's see if we can see the level. Information on oil level currently not available. How convenient, considering we've just changed the oil. Maybe it needs a little drive around and a little bit more of a warm up. So when you most want to check the oil levels correct is when it won't give you any information, which is quite hilarious, to be honest. I really should think about retrofitting a dipstick, because that's just not very useful in my opinion. Now, the game's not over there unfortunately, because we've still got the warning telling us that the service is due. The car won't magically know that its oil's been changed. So what I have got is a launch diagnostic tool, which I'm going to use to reset the service. While the oil's warming up a little bit, and hopefully we'll get a reading in a short while, I'm going to get on with that. This is the Launch X431 Pros Elite. I've done a whole other video about it if you're interested. It's actually quite an amazing tool, and it's what I'm going to use to easily reset the service interval today. So, hoping it's in there. Reset service looks promising. So, reset maintenance interval. What's the day? 27th. So it was an oil service and brilliant. Alright. The oil's up between 70 and 80 degrees now, so it's almost up to temperature, but there's still no oil level reading. I think what needs to happen is it goes for a little drive around, and then hopefully I can get a reading, but effectively the job's finished. Well, the service reset worked, but still no oil level, which is a little bit concerning. Really glad I measured what came out and put the same amount in, because I'd be getting a bit nervous now that I was either overfull or underfull. Right, well that's how you oil service your 958 Cayenne. Hopefully that's been useful to you. Please do give us a thumbs up if it has been. Of course, I'll link to all the tools and all the parts in the description of this video, so check that out. I've got a good parts list for you there that should hopefully save you some time. Make sure you subscribe. I think one of the next things I'm going to do is the whole rest of the service on this car, all the other filters, the fuel filter, the pollen filter. Also thinking about doing a DIY gearbox service on it as well, because that's quite an expensive job to get somebody else to do. So yeah, make sure you stay tuned for that. Thank you very much for watching.